So it is interesting to see that America has been planning for aggressive nuclear war, in fact, since 1946, but that was just suggestions. But the real plans of attack started in 1952, and these plans were ready in 1959, and they had been suggested to President Eisenhower, which refused them. And in 1962, the same general, Curtis LeMay, in fact, his name, proposed them to President Kennedy to destroy Russia. But if I tell you the plans, just as a, it's not really funny, but to give you an idea, I think they planned for something like 7,000 nuclear warheads to be sent on Russia, China, and Eastern Europe. Moscow alone would receive 180 nuclear warheads. So this is an extermination attempt. This is not just winning a war. It's completely leveling and destroying every single person who would inhabit Russia and completely take it out of the world. And so it sounds insane, of course, because when you look into the details of what is the effect of an explosion, and you look at the real effects in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and even when they did plan, they did simulation. The effects of the blast, the fire, the radiation is quite huge. It's not a complete total death of everything, but very near that. So this was quite crazy, in fact. But they were serious about it. They put military power and the forces of America at full speed to be able to deliver this in the 50s and 60s. So what about today? What are the scenarios? Well, first of all, we cannot exclude scenarios of local wars. And in today's world, well, clearly there is still tension between India and Pakistan, but I think it's unlikely, because this is a typical case where you have two countries which have the means to completely destroy the other. So why would you do it? This makes no sense. So probably, if they are sane and if they are logic, this will not happen. Another scenario is what the media has put forward in the last few years of Iran and Israel. I don't believe it, because Israel face no threats from Iran, and they know it. It's just media and propaganda, but in reality, Israel is not threatened by Iran. So I don't believe that Israel would strike Iran, at least not with nuclear weapons. Israel has a policy of they call this the Samson option, which means that if they are threatened with invasion and they would lose an invasion, which is completely unlikely today because they have such overwhelming military power today, well, in that scenario, they would use their nuclear warheads to destroy all of their enemies. And I don't know if that includes me, I don't know, but I fear that it does. So 400 nuclear warheads is enough to destroy quite a lot of the world. But I think it's a bit unlikely. Why would Israel and Iran go on a war like that? It makes no sense. The third local scenario is North Korea and South Korea, but none of them has anything to gain with anything more than boasting that they have weapons and making a lot of money with the sanctions and black market that goes around it. So I think it's unlikely. There has been in the last 15 years one likelihood, which I believe is probably gone now, which was that the United States had developed, not only them, Israel as well, what they call the mini nukes, which are miniaturized nuclear warheads that they can put on some very small precision bombs or missiles. Well, you know how American precision bombs and missiles are. Well, roughly, these were to be used to destroy a factory or an underground research center or a bunker of command and control. So these things were considered to be used in Iraq against Saddam Hussein. They were considered to be used against the nuclear research of Iran. And they were strongly suggested in the 2000s, from 2003 to 2010, there was the possibility that the United States would launch such an attack. But today it's out of the question, because in fact, I believe that the scenario that we talked, that Sheikh Imran Hussein talked earlier, is more probable, unfortunately. And this is the fact that, at least from the United States point of view, and remember in the 90s, there was this Project for a New American Century that was this lobbying group that became part of the Bush administration and that pushed for total dominance of the United States on energy resources and economies of the world, and making sure that there would be no competition from emerging powers such as China and Russia. And of course, in that matter, they failed. And they spent at least two, but probably at least 3 or 4 times that amount, thousands of trillions of billions of dollars, so $2 to $8 trillion for their wars in Iraq, Afghanistan, and across the world. So that plan of controlling the world through economic and military means has failed. And what you see today is the United States, and this was the theme of my conference in August, if you remember. It has been put online today, so I'm happy that it's out at last. The United States, not only it has failed in its economic and military dominance on the world, and that failure is being obvious more and more to more and more people, including in America, especially in America. The economic power that was based on the military strength, but also the petrodollar, is decreasing. Now, more and more countries are dealing oil, petrol, in euros or in other currencies. And the world economy is reorganizing across also local economic partnerships between China and Russia, between the BRIC countries and so on. And so that dominance is fading, and it is more and more obvious as inside the United States, you see poverty and economic collapse growing every day. Despite what you hear in the news, which are fake numbers, if you look at the real data from the economy, you see massive unemployment growing every day for the last almost 10 years now. And the war machine and the owners of the United States of America, it's not the American people, it has nothing to do with them, but the owners of that country, of that nation, what Eisenhower used to call the military-industrial complex, which one should add the financial oligarchy that also runs in more and more, sees that their machine of world domination is not functioning anymore, and it's breaking down. So there is a very significant scenario that to avoid, when everything is lost, there's only one way to go is war, because war can throw a lot of things in the air, and they still have a powerful military, which I don't believe that that most of the American military is not willing to follow the orders to go for another war. But you can have another 9/11, you can have another inevitable mess somewhere in the world, and indeed today the most probable one is what is happening around Syria. And clearly, as Sheikh said, the involvement of Turkey, which may be an autonomous, it's very hard to assess if this is something that NATO supports, if it's something that President Erdogan, which I like to call Enver Pasha II, for those who know history, is it something that he and his family needs because they need the money flow from the different trades that there is with the occupied territory of ISIS? It's difficult to say, but certainly this is a place today where things can be very hot. And when you have a lot of moving parts from many countries, you have NATO, you have the legal Syrian government army, you have different terrorist groups supported by different countries, you have Turkey, you have Iran, you have all these, and Russia, of course, all these powers with powerful weapons in a very small part of land. Mistakes can happen, and some mistakes can be provoked. And then the consequences are very hard to say. Maybe Turkey sends planes to bomb forces inside Syria, and maybe Russians shoot down some of Turkish planes, and then Turkey closes down the Bosphorus so that ships from Russia cannot supply its bases in Syria. And then what? It's very hard to say. I do not know the future, but certainly there are scenarios very likely that can go very, very far. And again, the rulers, the owners of the United States may basically think, how about we reboot everything? And when I look at the scenarios of the 1950s, the arrogance was that if we completely exterminate our enemies before they can act, then we are the only ones standing, which is a completely insane approach considering the power of nuclear weapons. And I should add that with nuclear weapons, you have also bacteriological warfare. Okay, chemical warfare is not likely in that kind of scenarios, but certainly bacteriological warfare is. And Russia and the United States still have very, very advanced and powerful biological weapons that could be released as well. So, or by mistake, which is also a possibility. So certainly, we have to watch very, very carefully what's happening today in Syria and in that region, because the possibility that this escalates to, again, that scenario, which is completely crazy, which could come to say, well, we're losing our military power, we're losing our economy, let's launch the missiles and let's destroy Russia and China. And so then, by default, we are the only ones left standing. At least this is what the leaders of the United States may be thinking.